We are here today for a very special event. We have 5 experts in self-publishing. This is a topic that our members have expressed a lot of interest in. We have something like 60 people registered to be with us online today. So welcome to all of you online. I'm sorry we weren't able to fit you in the room, but I hope you'll get a lot out of this session nonetheless. And you will have an opportunity to write your questions in the chat. Is that right, John?
In the Q&A.
In the Q&A section of your Zoom screen. So I'm going to introduce our esteemed experts, and then I'm going to yield my seat to Riley Palanka, who is going to MC the event. First of all, and these are in alphabetical order, Latoya Belfon is an author, educator, workshop, and webinar facilitator, CEO of LabWorks Publishing, and a dynamic motivational speaker. With a portfolio of over 15 children's books and goal-setting guides and successful collaborations as a publisher, Latoya has left her mark on the literary landscape. Latoya, can you just say hi so the camera picks you up?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Del Chatterson is a writer, entrepreneur, business advisor, and cheerleader for entrepreneurs. He has written 2 business books and is currently working on a series of crime thriller novels and a collection of short stories. Del, can you say hi?
I can say hi.
I hope that's working. We have no feedback here. Laura MacAulay is a freelance manuscript editor specializing in fiction and creative nonfiction. She has worked as a story reviewer and bookshelf curator for Episode, the world's largest mobile publisher of interactive teen fiction, and as a manuscript editor for Friesen Press, one of Canada's best-known self-publishing service providers. Can you say hello?
I can. Hello.
And Don Macdonald, a little to my right, is a journalist, writer, and editor. He has more than 20 years of work experience as a political and business reporter and columnist for the Canadian Press and the Montreal Gazette. He's also on the board of the Quebec Writers Federation, so he gives back to his community in a very meaningful way. His first novel, Oman's Creek, was published in 2020. And Don, can you say hi?
Hello, everybody. Hi, Don.
And finally, James F. Olwell is an Irish-American writer and retired community organizer from the Bronx, living in Montreal, a fellow New Yorker. He co-founded the 2 Susan Poetry Circle and Speak Up, the Montreal Interactive Poetry Exchange. He is the author of 2 poetry chapbooks, Crossings, and Pensions. And if you could say hello.
How do you do? Nice to be here with you all.
Great. I am going to leave and go in that corner over there, and I invite you to welcome Riley Palanka. Out of the way.
All right, thank you very much. Hi, everyone. I'm Riley, so I'll be, kind of leading this discussion. But as Laurie mentioned, we're going to keep it a little bit informal. We're going to start off. I have our 5 guest speakers. They sent me some things that they'd like to perhaps talk about, some interesting discussion points. So I'll ask each of them a question, and they'll talk a little bit for around 5 minutes. And, afterwards, if people have anything to comment or anything to add, we can use that, little space for that. And then we'll go, we'll ask each of them a question. And at the end, we'll open it up for people in the room if you have anything you'd like to ask that hasn't been covered yet. And we'll also open it up to people in the chat. John will read any questions that come up from the Q&A. So my first question is to Latoya Belfon, who I've been corresponding for years now. It's the first time we've met in person. Yeah, but she's led a workshop for us a couple of years ago, but that was during the days of the pandemic. So you didn't lead it, you would have done it here, but then you did it online. It's nice for you to welcome. It's nice for us to welcome you in this space. So Latoya, can you talk about the importance of setting goals for authors? I.e., is there like a one goal fits all type scenario?
Well, no, I say this, and so usually when I do my workshops, this is the first part of the workshops I start with. So I say you need to define your author goals. So what do I mean by that is, what are your expectations for your book? Like, who are your readers? I start asking these types of questions that start critical thinking, because sometimes when you meet an author, an aspiring author, and they have a project, they're limited in how they're thinking about the book, and so it limits the resources they can access. So what they're able to do, marketing strategies, how they're able to brand themselves for the success of the book. So it's important to think, what do I want to achieve with this book? Are you looking to build your brand? Are you a life coach, a fitness instructor, finance? What are you looking to use this book as? It is also important to think about your goals as it pertains to your target audience, because it really helps restructure how you design, even how you design your book cover. You know, so those are the things that I really want authors to think about. And why that is so important is because when I started my journey, I had no idea. I just wanted to learn publishing and learn it fast. So I spent a lot of time gaining knowledge, but I didn't expect this book to become my biggest selling book. It's constantly on the top of the Amazon charts. It is at Brown's University in New York, Queens. I'm not sure why it's there, but if you search on WorldCat, you will see where it is all over the world. It's in 20 libraries in Toronto, all by metadata, which is probably something we'll touch on later today, but nothing to do with ads or me doing any work. But what happened is when I published this book, I don't have the rights to it because I used Amazon's way, using their ISBN. I did not know what my goals were. I did not know about intellectual rights. I did not know about keeping the rights to myself. I did not even know that ISBNs for Canadians were free at the time. So now if Amazon KDP decides, I don't want Latoya's book online anymore, my book is gone, as well as all the metadata and all the success it has done over the years. There'll be no trace of it online. So this is why it's important to think about what goals, what is my expectations for my book? How far do I want to take my book? And what measurable goals can I have? Best-selling charts, sales, personal fulfillment. It will really help you decide the effort, the time, the money you put into your book and your branding as an author. Yeah.
If you don't mind me asking, Latoya, in your case, what were your goals when you were, writing Grandma's Hands, and like, what was your dream for it?
My goal was to express a story, a journey of motherhood, a journey, an immigrant's journey, a journey to coming into a new place and using whatever skills you have to grow and develop and to establish yourself for your generation. And I wanted it to be a story that was relatable to not just the Black individual. This is why I chose not to have a face for the grandmother, and I just had her hands to focus on. This hands could look like anything and any person, because we all want to leave a legacy for our children to make the life that they will have be easier. We don't want them to have the same struggles like they could. We all share that for our children. So that's the intention, behind it. And that was the goal. I didn't expect it to touch so many people and to make such a huge impact. And it's one of the biggest regrets. So I start with a big regret for everyone in the workshop. ISBNs, if it's one thing you take from me, is that ownership is important. And thankfully, we're in Canada where it's so easy to have that. I have a lot of clients from the States. As you know, you have to pay every time you want an ISBN that would limit how much I produce, by the way, if I was in the States, it would be tough for me as an author. But here we have that liberty. So let's make sure to get informed about it and use that liberty. Yeah.
Since you mentioned it, Latoya, what is the importance of owning an ISBN for a self-published author?
So for a self-published author, it's your rights to move your book, do whatever you want with your book. Also, you have copyrights, and I'm sure other people will talk about that as well. And I don't think many self-published authors even copyright their work. But sometimes when I do have my workshops or consultations, I feel like I'm always going into a horror story, perhaps, because you never think these things would happen to you, right? You never think that you would meet someone on Facebook, think that you're a professional literary agent and lose your manuscript. But it did happen to someone. Many people it happened to. And that work was not copywritten, and that was lost. That was lost to that author. And so this is important to do. It costs $50. I mean, again, another benefit that we have here in Canada to copyright your idea and to have some sort of protection for your work when you work with other people who you regard as professionals, some may not. So a part of the self-publishing journey is that we look for discounts, you look for the easiest way sometimes, it's not always the best. And so you would be working with people and sometimes, you don't offer an NDA, which you should. This was the advice of my lawyer pretty early on, was anybody who's working on your project, you offer them a NDA and you make sure that your work is protected, you copyright your ideas. And so these steps, again, as a self-publisher, if you don't have your author goals clear in mind, you will be making decisions that could harm you in the future. So this is important. Find a way to copyright your work, find a way to protect your work, and ask questions. Ask a lot of questions. I think I worked on a project with an author and he wanted this specific picture for his book cover. But it came with so many prohibitions and so many restrictions and so much that we couldn't do with that particular license. And it was something that I was like, thank God I asked the question, because can you imagine spending so much time developing your book and then you hear once you pass 1,000 copies, we need a cut. So what is this? So ask the questions, make sure when you have an illustrator or book designer who is working on your project, if you see that they use an image, make sure you know if you have any rights to use that image and how big is it only in Canada, is it international? How much production and I've done that before, I've had licenses for images that told me after a certain amount of copies of books sold, I will need this amount. Yeah. So I keep check because you just never know. So those are things that are really important to ask those questions and find out the information, because without a traditional publisher, without someone professionally guiding you through these steps, you may make a decision that could harm your journey as an author.
Thank you very much, Latoya. Any questions for Latoya? Anything? Yeah, go ahead, Kate.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm just wondering about copyright. I heard that if you mail it in an envelope and don't open it, it counts as a sort of copyright.
I mean, you could say that.
Okay, but it's better to pay the $50.
Yeah, like here it's $50, it's much better.
Okay.
And just to keep in mind, you won't be able to copyright your entire manuscript, but you'll be able to put a snippet of your book and things like that in there, and it's $50. You get a beautiful certificate from it's so beautiful and it's all yours.
Okay.
So I wouldn't take the chance with a letter. And just in case that book ends up being so huge, they'll find a way to. I don't take a chance. So yeah, that's what I would say.
The Copyright Office, you can do it for $50, as Latoya mentioned, but ISBN in Canada's are free, as Latoya also mentioned.
Yes, all free.
Any other question or comments on Latoya, or even on how to set an author's goal? Going on. So we can always ask her questions later, but let's move on to Del Chatterson. Del, you're a very prolific person, and you handle a lot of business aspects aside from your literary writing. How much of an entrepreneur must one be in handling the business side of being a writer, or being a self-published writer?
Yeah, thank you again for the opportunity to present and share my stories with other writers. Thank you to EWF. And I guess just a quick segue from what Latoya was saying, that the basic principles of entrepreneurship, which I've sort of written 2 books and can be summarized in a few words, is have a purpose and a plan and avoid the mistakes. And that's pretty much what you described. And so the other thing that I've observed in what I call my storytelling journey from entrepreneurship to authorpreneurship is that entrepreneurs and writers, or artists in general, have a lot in common in terms of having to be disciplined, train themselves, learn the craft, and then be disciplined about doing the work and getting better and testing the market, all those kinds of things. And both require a lot of creativity. So that's the part that my transition from being an entrepreneur, advising entrepreneurs, writing about entrepreneurship in a couple of business books, and then writing fiction was the process of exercising more creativity, more imagination. As I say, in a lot of experience, I've got a lot of stories, and then a combination of bad memory and good imagination gives you the opportunity to write fiction. So that's kind of the journey. If you want to take a minute, I can sort of go through the milestones. I brought samples that
Absolutely, but I actually have a specific question just based on your answer. Can you give us an example of how your skills, in entrepreneurship or in advising entrepreneurs were able to relate to your skills now as an offer?
I guess the skills and experience of an entrepreneur help you avoid the mistakes of being exploited by the self-publishing industry. There are a lot of people out there selling services and taking advantage of ambitious but naive artists without any entrepreneurial experience. They're not good at negotiating the contract, reading the fine print. They get contacted. I mean, I still get phone calls, spam calls saying, Mr. Chatterson, your book has been recommended to us by one of our editors. We'd like to acquire your book. But what they do is they want to sell you their services to market or publish the next one. And it's nonstop. And so that would be the thing that I think I have an advantage with entrepreneurial experience that I'm hard to take advantage of. I'm very skeptical of any pitch, whether they want to buy my timeshare unit or my book. It's usually spam and they're going to waste your time and take your money. And my description of some of the author services companies is basically they stroke your ego with one hand and they pick your pocket with the other. So you have to be cautious of that approach. And so I think the entrepreneurial experience, if you have some business experience or you're generally aware of what people are doing to make money for themselves, not for you, then you have to be careful in that process. So that's where the entrepreneurial experience has been valuable to me. And that would be I think that some of the stories you tell and what other people tell is that it's easy to get sold a package, $12,000 worth of marketing and $2,500 to produce your book, and we'll do all these things for you. But then what they do is they send it to somebody in the Philippines or India to put it together for you, send it back, edit it. So my advice is avoid the term self-publishing. That suggests that you did it yourself. I kind of make sure that you say, independently published, but I've used experienced professional resources for coaching me in the writing, for the editing, for the publishing, and the distribution. So if you do all that, you're more likely to be successful. You'll have a product you can be proud of and show to the world and your friends and family as well. You don't necessarily sell anymore, but at least it'll get accepted as a good quality product.
Thank you, Del. I do have one more question for you, but before I do that, I'll see if anyone in the room has. Okay, go ahead.
Again, sorry.
It's okay. Ask
So when you're
questions.
talking about being independently published, would you also come up with a logo and a name for your publication?
Well, yeah, that's where you have to sort of manage your resources. And like when I say self-published, this was the first book I published was clearly do it yourself. That's what self-published looks like. I got on the computer, I did a cover, and I printed it at Bureau Olwell or something, and I used it in a course I was getting at Concordia on how to write a business plan. The complete do-it-yourself guide to business plans was basically my notes from the course. And I tried to sell it for $69.95. I just noticed. Students never like it.
That's your business plan.
I should have threatened them with low marks. But then I took it to Author House. My first experience in using author services was Author House. So that's what it looked like professionally done by an author services company. Author House has the worst reputation in the world, I think. And they take advantage, and they're very good at selling their services. But as I was saying, I was pretty skeptical and careful about what I agreed to and made sure that they delivered what they promised, which they did. It was reasonably acceptable ebook, softcover and hardcover. And they did my second book, which was called Don't Do It the Hard Way, which was all my advice from 30 years of consulting and just entrepreneurship. And so that's one way of doing it, is use these author services and be careful about, like, they allowed me to say, what you start with is a good book. And that advice actually from David Shilton, the wealthy barber.
Oh, yeah.
And I used his theme of The Wealthy Barber, and the author is your Uncle Ralph. In case you have an Uncle Ralph, it's a me. So I used that friendly idea, and so you get to choose how you present your ideas on paper. You choose a title. You can make some suggestions on the cover, and then they will do it professionally. And I republished those myself with different resources independently. So instead of Author House and the first novels I did with Tellwell, which is a Canadian author services company, Tellwell and Friesen are similar companies in Canada that will give you a package. The thing I liked about Tellwell over Friesen is that Tellwell was willing to unbundle. So I said, I don't need an editor. I don't need a cover designer. I've already hired somebody else to do the cover and to do the interior design. And I've got 2 or 3 editors that help me make it a good book. And then they'll do the final production and send it into publishing. And then I took back the rights to set up distribution with Amazon or Ingram, or the 2 that you can manage yourself if you want to, or you can delegate it to your author services company. So those are all the kind of decisions that are required, and part of it is you may be able to do it yourself, write the book, design the cover, and get it into distribution, but you probably shouldn't unless you're a professional. Experienced professional are the 2 words that I would say to it. I'm indie published, and I've used experienced professionals who have done this work in the same genre. It's different people for a business book than it is for a crime fiction and posing mystery versus a thriller or a historical fiction. So you need to find an experienced professional who knows what they're doing, which can cost you anywhere from $100 to get a cover to $500 to $1,500, depending on. And now, of course, you have the option of artificial intelligence, but it looks better than you doing it yourself, but it also becomes obvious that it's been done by.
We have a question from Michael, and then I do have one. Go ahead, Michael.
So the author services companies you mentioned, roughly what's the cost of their packages?
The starting package for one book can be $1,500. But it depends on what they include in the package, and between Friesen and Tellwell, Friesen would say, but they send all the stuff to their subcontractors for editing, for cover design, interior design, or low-cost labor in offshore places. We're in Winnipeg and we use local professional people to do all of that. So the package prices differ that way. And you may go, I use another service, which Reedsy, Reedsy.com, they sort of have a collection of freelancers to do everything from cover design to editing to marketing, which I haven't had good experience with their marketing consultants, but the rest have been okay. And you can just go online and, they'll find you on Instagram. On my current designers for these covers was a contact, like you said, on Facebook. I got contacted from Instagram by a company called Miblart, Miblart,
Yeah.
which turns out to be independent contractors in
Ukraine.
the Ukraine.
Yeah.
They leave Ukraine under the missiles, working on my cover. And I've given them 3 to do. And the interior design for paperback and ebooks, they've done a very good job. And they're low cost. Interior design and a cover is like $300 US. And they allow unlimited revisions, and I keep changing my mind. So that's kind of the process and the choices I've made to get me from 4 business books, the first edition in 2014, a second edition in 2020, and 1, 2, 3, 4 novels, plus 2 more in the crime thriller series.
Thank you, Del. Any more questions for Del, at least for now?
That's my journey.
I'm sure we'll talk to you more a little bit later.
Online, you want me to splash those in now, or should I?
Let's take a couple,
Sure, you might want to repeat it to the camera.
Absolutely.
After I say it out loud. So this one is a general question, for self-published authors. Do you try to specifically target the Canadian market as opposed to the US one? for the English speaking market at large? And if so, which tools do you use? For example, do you use NetGalley, BookBub, etc.? And what level of success do you have with those tools? And likewise, a similar question, has anybody tested NetGalley for audiobooks yet?
So to just repeat it for the camera, the question that we have has to do with whether distribution, do you focus more on the Canadian or the US market? And if, something to do with like different platforms, NetGalley, et cetera, and whether you vetted NetGalley specifically for audiobooks, a very specific question. Any of our research speakers would like to speak on this?
Oh, I could touch on it real quick. So again, it's based on your author goals and where you believe your market is for your books. So that will tell you with research. So for me, I have a lot of connections in Canada. Of course, I live here. I'm a teacher as well. So that means I have access to my target audience a lot. So of course, I leverage that for the beginning of my book. If I have a goal, that selling helps to get it recognized more in a way. So you try to work those things. You layer your strategies. You don't try to do everything at the same time. So I go for different goals at different times, different parts of my journey from once I launched this book. So I leverage here first. And then once I leverage here, that means after I've sold enough to get enough reviews. And I mean, if we have time later, we'll talk about online, how reviews help with the algorithm to push your book. After that, I use the reviews to leverage the book and take that over to US. So I never really start with US first because it's pretty tough. It's not easy over there, but I use how well the book has done here first in this market and then to take it over there after. So I would focus on one market at one time. That's how I usually do it. I don't remember the second question.
If you had experience using NetGalley for audiobooks.
No, I haven't used that. I would usually do Audible, like I've used where, again, the
Right.
target audience, what are users using the most? And that's where I want to publish my book. And that's where I want to target. I want the work to be halfway done for me, or most of it done for me. If my target audience is this pool right here, that's the service I will use to publish my books. And that's Audible for now.
That makes sense. If people listening to audiobooks use
Yeah,
Audible, then you
yeah.
have to be on Audible if you want your audiobook to be heard. Does anyone else want to chime in on that, or are we?
Well, just perhaps on the idea of two markets. I'm binational, was born and raised in the United States in New York City, and was there for 32 years, fell in love with a Quebecoise
Oh,
who was at the place where I was building the Irish Art Center. And so the book is The Art of Being Irish in Hell's Kitchen, a memoir on the organizing of the Irish Art Center in New York City, 1972, 1978. So the reason I wrote it is because it's a big deal now. 50 years later, it's a big $60 million building on 11th Avenue and so on, and very popular, but they have no idea about their origins. And some of their origins, for example, the pictures here, all of those pictures are no longer with us. And so they don't know. So to one market, I wanted to tell people about the history of the organization. That's a big market for me. But I've been living more of my life in Canada and in Montreal than I have in the United States. And so I have people who are friends, who are Francophone and sometimes have some affinity with things Irish. There is a small Irish community here. There are other people who are just, part of the thing is community organizing. And Professor Jim Torchiner of McGill, a great community organizer, is one of the people writing blurbs on it. So I look for my markets. My market, one would be in New York and places where there are Irish people who may be interested, and one would be in Canada. And the funny thing is, I went to an Irish organization here, which I felt most resembled the book, and they said, well, why should we be interested in what happened in 1972, 1978 over there in New York? And I said, just because where one is not where one winds up. This is a story of something that started small. There was no, now we had the resources of the city of New York. but we had no other resources. It was an Irish revolutionary socialist and a guy who didn't know what that meant to be Irish. And then we attracted people because we taught people free how to play traditional Irish music, the fiddle, the flute, the pipe, the baron, how to dance, how to speak Irish, etc., etc. And we told them about their culture, and so they became interested. I mentioned that that's an Irish thing, but that needn't be an Irish thing. And my personal journey was started because I was inspired by the Black Civil Rights Movement. And at a certain point in the Black Civil Rights Movement, Black people said, "Black is beautiful." Well, why do you have to say black is beautiful? Because somebody's saying black is not beautiful. And so the Black community said, we will define ourselves. We don't need your definition of us. We will define ourselves. And I went to the South Side of Chicago and lived in a neighborhood where I found out a lot, had a lot of influences of African Americans, and came back saying, okay, I'm not white. White is not a meaningful thing to me. I'm Irish. And then I realized that growing up, my father, who was an attorney, works for the city of New York, a astute person, around the dinner table, we talk about all the subjects. And he talked and spoke about slavery and the horrors of slavery. And he talked about the Holocaust and the horrors of the Holocaust. But he never mentioned the Irish famine, which occurred in the middle of the 19th century, and the reason most Irish people came to Europe and the other cities. He never mentioned it. Why did he never mention it? Why did he say, Jim, you're an American, that Irish stuff is not going to do you any good. So anyway, it had to do with us coming to the point of saying, we want to redefine ourselves. We're told we're ultra-Catholic and we're very conservative and patati. And we said, 1970 Americans in New York, no, we don't think that's who we are. So it was a discovery. So anyway, I mean, I've gone on telling my story, but in terms of I have in Quebec, I see having 3 places. I've worked in NDG as a community organizer. I still know people there. This book is about community organizing. I'm launching it at Le Port de Tête, which is a francophone bookstore, and it's in English, but I speak French, and my children are francophone and trilingual, and they will bring their friends. My girlfriend's francophone, she will bring. There's going to be enough people, and I will speak to them in French. But if I read from the book, it's going to be in English. So I've decided that's one of my things. And one is in NDG, where I worked as a community organizer for over 25 years, and I know some people there, and they're going to help me. And then a third place is the Irish community. If I can convince them, it's important to read the book. Okay, I think I've said enough for a while. I'm not sure you asked those questions. That's my answer.
You wanted to say something, Dan?
Well, just on the question of marketing and distribution,
Yes.
and, yeah, and it's kind of worth reinforcing that the same message that we had. First, you have to write a good book, do all the acquisition of the skills and get all the good coaching and editing that you can to have a good book. Then show the due respect to your book by getting it published up to industry standards in terms of the cover, interior design, and the presentation, hardcover, paperback, or ebook, or Audible now, which is getting more and more popular. But the third and most difficult part is the marketing and distribution. But again, it's the same process. How much can you do by yourself, for yourself? And how much are you willing to pay to do better than you will do by yourself? And what I've learned is that I've tried all of those different resources and channels of distribution and consultants and marketing and promotional campaigns, but there are other people who are doing it better and spending more money on it and consequently selling a lot more books. So you're up against competition. And I think, as you were saying, if you could spend a lot of time on the marketing and learning about metadata and how to manipulate the algorithms on Amazon. You can focus on Amazon, or you can go to Kobo and learn. Maybe that's the place out, because Kobo is like, that does better in Canada. Not better than Amazon, but
that brings up also, given talking about selling and what will bring you money, is the question of royalties.
yeah.
And in my situation, it's with Friesen Press, who I found, I was not exploited by them. And they were a worker-owned company, and I might have made some mistakes with them because I wish I'd had, this discussion 4 years ago when I started. But if it'll be on, they have some Ingram, which is this distributor and so on, and it's on Amazon, and I couldn't find it, but people have told me they bought it on Amazon. Because my story is me selling it is what will bring me a reasonable royalty. I'll get $10 if I sell it. And then, of course, with a book that costs 25 Canadian and 20 US, I'll get $10 because having purchased in 250 copies from Friesen. If you buy it from Amazon, you'll pay 30 some dollars and I'll get $2. And Chapters, I think, is more or less the same thing and so on. So just in one aspect, and I didn't write this to make money. It's very clear. It wasn't my idea, and therefore I didn't fail.
That's my final advice to entrepreneurs. It's a very bad business plan.
But what I found is that you're the seller. In my case, I'm selling it to friends. I just sold one to my friend Liz over there. I sell it to personal friends. And even that costs money because you have an espresso. And if you buy their espresso, there goes your royalty. It's gone. And don't buy a Guinness, whatever you do. But that's where, and then in mailing. And if you mail to Canada, to friends, I have family in Nova Scotia, for example, then it's reasonable. The cost is, I think it's about $7 to sell a book of this weight and the cover. And I think they did a good job on the cover. I mean, I gave them the photograph, but it turned out pretty nice. But I made a mistake. My brother has been very helpful. He lives in Denver. And so I brought the book over to the Canadian Post Office and I sent it, and it cost me $21 in postage to go to Denver. So I learned if you're going to the United States, don't go to the post office around the corner, cross the border. And okay, so maybe everybody knows this except me. And so that's what I did. I went over there, and they do a great job, and I sent books, and it cost $4 and 20 cents or 50 cents or something like that. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that up about, again, it's for someone who is not going to make a living at it, who wants to get my friends and people who might have an interest in it to read the book, and that's it. And that will have a shelf life of a certain period.
Well, thank you so much. Let's pivot a little bit. I'd like to talk to Don Macdonald. You've been very quiet today. So you've had a lot of success with your book that came out a few years ago. And I know that in self-publishing, there can be a lot of struggles, a lot of hurdles, but I'd like to know, what are some advantages that come with being a self-published writer?
Well, we've already talked about some of them. I think to be self-publishing, in my case, like many people, I tried first to get an agent and approached a number of agents and was unsuccessful at that, and then approached a bunch of publishers, including both large and small publishers. And again, no success. And I wasn't really willing to put this novel that I'd worked so hard on into a drawer. And I think the reality is that it's very hard especially for first-time writers to break in and to get an agent or a publisher. In some ways, they say that it's harder to get an agent than a publisher, if that's possible. But for me, I found that self-publishing had a lot of advantages, and one of the advantages is you have total creative control. I mean, it's your project. You keep all of your rights. You don't give your rights to anyone else. So when you push the button to make that book appear on Amazon or Kobo, or to print it through Ingram, it's the product that you've that you've envisioned, that you've dreamed of, and that you've produced. So in that way, you have total control over it. The other thing is that you can publish when you want. It's a fast process. Once you have your manuscript, it's literally pushing a button and it's published, and it's out in the worldwide. So when you're publishing with a with a publisher, you go onto their list, and it can take up to 2 years to be published by them. So these are the different. Oh, you also get you keep a higher percentage of your royalties than you would through a traditional publisher. I think that's true. So if you sell well, you can you keep not only your rights, but you get a higher percentage of royalties. So these are some of the advantages. The disadvantages, I also, because I thought that would be useful as well. I think it's we have to be honest and say it's less prestigious than being published by a publisher. You have to, you know, I don't think that, you know, Bill, you're using the expression in independent publishing, which is fine. I set up my own publishing company, and but I think that, to be honest, you know, if I want to be published by a large publishing house in New York City, I would go for that, you know? But the other thing is distribution. I think is a difficult distribution of hard copies to bookstores. I did distribute through Ingram, which is basically your only option when it comes to hard copies. That's not through well, you have Amazon, but for distribution to bookstores, it's basically Ingram, and I'm doing it on a consignment basis. And I did that. My book is set in Winnipeg, and I distributed it to several stores in Winnipeg and also in Montreal, where it was well reviewed, and that it did very well, especially in Winnipeg. But that's a lot of work. I mean, you have to keep, you know, track of. First, you have to approach the stores, and then get the books to the stores, and then track them, the sales, and work with the publishers. I mean, with the bookstore owners. So that's a difficult. You can, as I understand it, there seems to be a service where you can get your book distributed to bookstores. But the thing with publishing, and Del mentioned it's a bad business. One of the reasons it's a bad business is if it doesn't sell, they send you back your books. So I don't think anyone wants to have a garage full of books or a basement full of books. So that's another big disadvantage, is distributing hard copies to bookstores is very difficult when you're self-publishing.
I have to thank Lori, because I was, you know, should I buy 250 books for a lesser price per book, or 500 books and then really a lesser price? And she said, yeah, Jim, and then have the 250 in the basement.
Well, actually, the wonderful thing about self-publishing is that the technology is amazing. The direct to print technology now, that both by Amazon and by Ingram, and it means that Amazon gets an order and it prints the book overnight and it's delivered the next day, which is mind-blowing technology, really, when you think about it. Through Ingram, I think I was ordering, I ordered a big number of books to begin with. Like I'm talking in the sense of 200 to 250 books. And then you can just order as you need them. which is really, really great because at the beginning, I went down the road, with Friesen in Manitoba, not Friesen, the author services, but the printer in Winkler. And I was thinking in terms of buying, like, I think 500 books. And, that's when I started learning about Ingram, that I could buy just small amounts. And, it's a great way to go, because you buy the books as you need them, rather than taking a chance on a huge, well,
Yeah.
it's not huge by book publishing standards, but for us, it's a lot, 500 or 1,000 books is a lot. So,
I think, but I think that discussion is important to continue, though, is the decision between publishing yourself or independent or however, and selling them yourself and distributing them yourself, one book at a time, one buyer at a time, or more than that through a bookstore, or finding a traditional publisher. And the decision really is based on convincing a publisher. They're in it for the money. We may be in it because of the satisfaction of writing a book, and we have a few appreciative readers and enthusiastic fans, maybe. I don't have a publisher either, and traditional publisher is going to say, well, prove to me that there's a global market. I can sell at least 10,000 books. A bestseller in Canada is 3,000 books. That's it.
Yeah.
And Tellwell, the first thing they said to me when they offered me a badge is that you do realize that the average self-published author sells less than 100 books in his lifetime, mostly to family members who didn't pay for them.
Well, good, that's the best news I've heard so far. I mean, I think I'm ahead of that.
There you are.
And I even have some experience with universities, because I felt that there might be some interest. So I went to a number of universities, all in New York, mostly based. And Columbia said, was good luck to it and so on. We don't do memoir. NYU, which even has an Irish program there, didn't look at it. Cornell, different places, but Fordham University said that they would like it and looked at it, and I went and met with them. And I got the support of the editor-in-chief because he liked it. Same thing with SUNY Press, State University of New York Press.
Yeah.
But they all have to go to a committee.
Yeah.
And the committee came back with the same thing. Who's going to buy it?
That's it.
Yeah. And so maybe sometimes you sell it yourself because you can get who's going to buy it,
Yeah, well, that's it. The traditional publisher has to justify paying you an advance. Maybe it's only $5,000 to $10,000, $20,000.
And Fordham said it's 1,000. For them, a success is 1,000. Fordham University Press, 1,000 copies is a success.
Yeah,
Doesn't seem like a lot unless I'm trying to sell them. That seems enormous. Yeah.
On this topic, Don, since you kind of brought it up a little bit earlier, can you tell us a little bit about consignment? What consignment is, and how were you able to get your books into bookstores under consignment deals?
Well, consignment means that you give an agreed number of copies to the bookstore. And the bookstore takes them on the basis that they will sort of best efforts to sell them. So you might make an agreement with a bookstore to give them 10 copies, and they will try to sell them over a period of time. And you agree to what percentage of royalties that you will get, say 30% to you, 70% to the store, or something like that. I don't remember.
60-40 is in a couple of places.
Yeah.
Okay, 60.
And 60-40 for you, 60 for you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, the bookstore takes
60-40, okay. Is that my memory of the details? Yeah, it varies a bit, but some are more generous than others. The independent bookstores tend to be generous with the authors. So each one, but let's say 60-40. So they sell the book, and remit, and sometimes they don't have any luck selling the book, and they give you back whatever copies are left. For Indigo, it was a bit of a difficult time when I brought the book out because it was right in the middle of the pandemic. So that kind of hurt my ability to market, like to do readings in bookstores and stuff like that. And I think also Indigo was having a hard time, and they were restricting the number that they were of consignment books they were taking. I believe they have a program to take independently published books, but that's another thing that's difficult is that Indigo, each store is independently managed on this issue. So you have to, even within Montreal or Winnipeg, in my case, you have to go to the manager of each store and pitch them. So that's a lot. That's a big. It's a lot of work. But also I had there's a MacDonald Robinson Winnipeg is a very, very big player in the book publishing, the book selling industry in Manitoba, and they took and sold quite a few books, and also it's a crime book, it's a mystery book, so there's a crime book shop there where it did very well. And
did they do anything extra in terms of promoting it?
Yeah, I was there for they did a book signing, and also we did a webinar with them.
Yeah, that's important to do something to get in.
But again, the pandemic really restricted the amount of promotion I could do on live promotion. Here, Paragraph took it, and as Clio on the West Island, and a few other bookstore in Montreal West. So, I think I did maybe 12 bookstores, all on consignment basis.
That's a good number.
What I find really hard when I've had books in consignment is following through and getting the money.
Yeah.
Do you have like a way of organizing that?
Well, I keep a spreadsheet of all the sales, and so that's really where I keep track. The money, as they sell books and you send them more, then the money flows back and forth. You have to keep track because, for example, with Paragraph, I kind of lost track. And then when I went back, and I knew I was being remiss, but when I went back, they'd taken the books and shredded them, I think.
That's what you set up with Ingram. Set that up with Ingram, that they destroy the books?
No, I gave Paragraph some books on consignment, and they sold some books, but they also had I think 3 left. It was no big deal, but I was busy with other things. So, and they have I guess some kind of policy where if it doesn't sell in the next number of months, or I guess probably a year, whatever it is, that they need the bookshelf.
Oh, yeah.
So
they took them on consignment even though it was available from Ingram as well?
Yeah, okay. Ingram is an interesting case. So the bookstores can order the book from Ingram. If they, for example, I was reviewed in the Gazette, and the book on Queen Mary, the bookstore on Queen Mary, there's
Bibliophile.
pardon me? Bibliophile. She was anxious to get the book, and the only way she could get it was through Ingram, because I hadn't gotten to her yet to sell her books on consignment. So that's, and other books, it's been sold through Ingram as well in different places around the world, actually. So that's another way where bookstores can get a hard copy by ordering directly from Ingram.
I have a question about the Ingram thing. I wonder, those of you with more experience, Friesen Press, they say, we use Ingram, and so the book will go to 50,000 libraries and bookstores and so on. What does that mean exactly?
means-
Because I can't see.
What it means, it's on their calendar, they can order it from Ingram, and Ingram will send it to them and sell it to them.
But it's,
But how are they gonna know that,
That's it.
it's a marketing issue.
Yeah, but that's what I mean, like, must be
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of little messages that these book libraries are getting. So how do they know why pick my book rather than your book or yours or?
I don't think Ingram makes any effort unless you ask them to do marketing or you pay for a listing in their catalog.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's print on demand. So if somebody in a bookstore in South Africa orders it, they'll print and send it.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, so it's almost like you have a pool of resources, so Ingram is telling you that, okay, we'll put your book in this pool and all of these bookstores have access, that's all they have
Yeah.
access
Yeah.
to your book, so if you look on Barnes and Nobles, maybe someone in Barnes and Nobles, they're looking and the metadata shows them your book, and your book will be pulled and placed online, but not hard copy,
Mhm.
which is still good, right? It's still good to have that access. So that's what they are presenting you, access. Ingram Sparks is really incredible for access. Because right now, I believe that they sort of have, what is the word, monopoly I want to use,
Yes.
many, right, so many stores, many bookstores and schools will not order from anywhere else than through Ingram. And it's because of how you set up, you are the publisher, so that means like, my colleague is saying here that you will take the loss, and so for them to take your book, they need to see that if we don't sell these books, you're gonna take them back and we get back our money. And that's the kind of deal you have to make to have the access to a bookstore.
I paid $500 for insurance.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's that, yeah.
Yeah, you have to make those decisions
Yeah.
when you list with Ingram.
Yeah.
Yet the standard policy expected by booksellers is return for a refund,
mhm,
or they won't, instead of paying for it, return or destroy if they don't sell them.
mhm.
And if you don't have that included, they're not gonna order
You're
them to
not
start.
gonna order.
Let's just make a little bit of definition, because I know there might be people in the room, both here and online, who might not know, what we're talking about when we mention Ingram Spark. Is it correct to say that they're a distributor? What exactly, how would you describe Ingram? A distributor or a platform? What's that?
I would call them, the same as Prison Press, because they do have those services as well, but they're mainly, distributor, you could say manufacturer, but they have all of the services as a publishing company. They have marketing, they have book development, they have book design, they have book formatting, you can get everything there.
Could you just?
But I use them,
Oh,
sorry, no, but I use them mostly to print books.
I see.
So you can print, publish, or you can print and get copies of your, publish and get copies of your book, and your book is not online anywhere.
But bookstores can also order from them and.
Exactly.
It's the
Could
big
you-
draw for it, the
Could you,
bookstores.
okay, but could you print it and publish it yourself and then distribute it through Ingram?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Actually, on the subject of using Ingram for printing, I distribute through both Amazon and Ingram. And as you said, they will also print copies and send you samples or one at a time, and they'll do the print on demand. So every order they get from wherever they get it, they will send the book for you and pay you royalty. But an alternative that I would recommend you look at if you're interested is Rapido Press here in
Yeah,
Montreal.
that's great. That's why I use.
They'll do small runs,
Yeah.
and they will print 100 books for me at approximately the same delivered cost for this book. 350 pages,
Mhm,
4.5, 5.25 by 8 or something.
mhm.
And the same for these, as Ingram. By the time you add US dollars and shipping and the rest, it's about the same cost.
That's why I use Amazon. Ingram is way more expensive when you buying. Amazon, print and get my author copies are way cheaper.
Yeah, Amazon is.
Yeah, and very quick.
I thought I would just add another, we were talking about it for an hour now. We never defined it for the people in the room and online. Print on demand. I know Don kind of referenced it. So basically for, the kids at home, print on demand basically refers to a type of publication wherein the book is available for sale, but it's not been printed yet. But when a customer, usually on Amazon's website, goes to buy it, that's only when the book gets printed and then it gets shipped to the buyer. So that's what print on demand is. And again, one of the big players here is Amazon's KDP program, where a lot of offers, like, the people we've had here, they've posted their manuscripts there in a ebook format, or not still an ebook in an ebook format and in a printable format, to be more precise. And once someone goes and buys it, then they would print it. You had your hand up, Del.
I was just gonna add, in terms of definitions, it used to be the primary distinction between self-published and traditional published. Because the traditional publisher will print hardcovers first, then paperback, and then the ebook in sort of stages, and he'll print 5, 10, 100,000, depending on whether it's my book or John Grisham's, and they'll send them all around the world under the condition that if you don't sell them, we'll take them back. But that's why they need to be sure they're gonna make money before they take on your book. So it's really the primary distinction between, although there's now a lot of hybrid business models where the publisher, like I'm trying to negotiate a deal with, I've already incurred all the upfront costs. I've got the book edited, I've got the covers designed, I just want you to print 5,000, send them around the world and help me get them into distribution and do some of the market. And there are publishers all over the world that will make those kind of deals.
Oh, thank you, Del. Now, I know it's been an hour, we haven't gotten to Laura. Yeah, we're gonna get to you now. I have a lot more questions for all of you, but I want to ask Laura something that's kind of come up, in our discussion, which is the importance of having a high quality product. So Laura, Laura's a bit different from the other 4 people we have here. And Laura is not a self-published author. She's an editor that works, a lot with self-published writers. So Laura, what's the importance of, or rather, what should one consider when hiring an editor? And what types of editing should one get, specifically if you're looking to, publish your own work?
Right. Well, for people who are new to writing books, when we hear about editing, we usually think about copy editing or proofreading. So copy editing being where we're correcting grammar and spelling mistakes and cleaning up typos, putting the punctuation marks in the right spot, and so on. But and when you look online at resources on self-publishing, often they'll assume that copy editing is the only type of publishing that you need to get on your book before it hits the shelves. But there's actually a lot more types of editing you can get done on your book, which becomes really interesting, especially if you're writing your first book, or if you're switching genres and trying out a new genre, if you're a nonfiction writer crossing over into fiction, for example, or if you're writing your first picture book or whatever. It can be good to get some critical feedback on where, how your book fits within that genre that you're working in, and whether you'll be catering to your readers' expectations. For example, if you're writing a romance novel, let's say, but your book doesn't have a happy ever after and the lovers ending, Leo DiCaprio falls into the ocean. And you're thinking, this is a romance book, I'm going to market it as a romance book. Your readers are going to be probably pretty mad at you and not give you good reviews. So that's when it's good to partner up with a freelance editor who specializes in romance or whatever your genre is, and check that you're ticking off all of the boxes for that niche. They can also help you with, I think it was Roald Dahl who said, there's only one commandment in writing a book, and that's thou shalt not bore the reader. And so that's actually really, really difficult when you're writing a book, not to have any boring parts. So when you get an editor's help, they can point out for you, with, tact, but also honesty, which you might not get from your close friends and family members. Well, this part, it looks like you're taking us down the garden path, and my attention is drooping. So here are a couple of craft strategies you can implement in your revisions to make sure that readers are actually going to get all the way through the book. They can also tell you about, let's say there's a part of the book that comes at the end, but if you flipped it around and moved it to the beginning, all of a sudden the logical flow of ideas would make a lot more sense for readers. So stuff that you might not notice when you're so involved in the book that you can't even tell left from right anymore because you've read it and reread it so many times, and you just, so someone with a fresh pair of eyes to give you some pointers on moving your book to the best place it can possibly be before you put it out into the world, because then it's too late after that. So that's basically the type of editing you can do before copy editing. And in the publishing industry, there's a couple of different names for those kinds of editing. The first one you will call it a manuscript evaluation or a manuscript critique or an assessment or a reader's report. Those are all the same names, different names for the same thing. And with that type of service, by the way, these are the same types of editing that get done in traditional publishing houses. So you're just mirroring the process, but you're doing it with freelancers instead of the publishing house giving you their own staff to work with you on the book. So in the manuscript assessment, they'll give you a written report that's basically a critique of your manuscript strengths and weaknesses, whether it relates to pacing, tension, clarity, point of view, all kinds of issues, style, and give you some feedback on revision. And that can, I don't know if I should get into the cost.
Yes, please.
Okay. So, yeah, so I did a survey on this year for average rates, because I know that's really important. And so in Canada, for a manuscript critique, and we're talking about 50,000 words and more. We're not talking about a shorter book like a picture book. You're looking at about, on average, 2 cents a word. So within that range, of course, there is so much variation because it's not standardized. It depends on how much experience your editor has, how much prestige. It depends how much feedback they're going to be giving you for that critique as well, because you can get a critique that's 2 pages long. You can get one that's 35. So those are going to cost different amounts. So just make sure you know what you're getting before you pay for it. And if you are going for a cheaper service, know that you'll probably be getting a shorter critique, so less hand-holding in your revision process. Moving on to the next stage of editing is a more thorough edit. It's called substantive editing in Canada and developmental editing in the US. You'll see both of those terms being used online. And you don't just get a report with that type of editing, you get an annotated manuscript with comments throughout every chapter of your work. And again, practical strategies to improve your draft. Again, it's revision to in relation to all of those big picture items, such as the narrative tension if you're writing fiction, or whether you need more supporting evidence if you're writing nonfiction, all kinds of stuff. And that you're looking at on average 5 cents a word. So it tends to be more expensive, but you get a ton of feedback. I will often spend up to 3 to 5 weeks on a developmental edit. It is very thorough.
Yeah.
But once you get it back, you know where to go. You've got a very clear roadmap to use. So it can be really handy, especially when you're not really sure how your work is landing with your target audience. I have one more type of editing to get into. So now that you've worked on what contents are going into your book, how you're organizing them, how they're structured, you can also enlist an editor's help at the line level. So we talked earlier about copy editing with spelling and grammar and punctuation, but there's also a lot of stylistic concerns. For example, if you're writing a rhyming picture book and your meter is off, it might not be fun to read out loud. So that's the kind of area where it's really good to get some critical feedback and some suggestions from editor who specializes in picture books. You'll also get, for example, if you're writing, let's say a business book, and overall your tone is colloquial, as if you're just having a conversation with your readers, but then there's one chapter where you get very formal and academic. That's likely to be jarring. So a line level editor can suggest edits to in your word choices, your diction, and your syntax to make sure that the tone is consistent all the way through. And the types of edits you can get at that level are just, there's so many things to consider. My favorite type of stylistic edit is about concision. So when I write something the first time, I usually use like 3 times the words that I actually need to get those ideas across, and I repeat myself over and over. And it's in the editing process that I'll trim out and then just get to really the meat and bones of what I want to say. And if you don't do that, you get into boring territory because you're having to work too hard to understand the writer's ideas. So I'll often reduce the word count of a manuscript by 5 to 15%, just by getting rid of the unnecessary words that are not adding anything to the book. So that's when people get a line edit back or a stylistic edit back, they're like, hey, my book reads like a real book now. So the transformation can be pretty remarkable. Stylistic editing for price, you're looking at about 5 cents a word. And again, it really depends on your genre, who you choose to work with, and all kinds of factors. But that's just to give you a ballpark. And that includes the sentence mechanics, making sure that you haven't that your comma is going within the closing punctuation marks instead of on the outside, which is the UK way, but here in Canada it goes on the inside. A lot of people don't know that. And yeah, that's kind of, does that answer your question?
It does, it does. And what about you? Do you still need a proofreader at the very end of it all, right? Or
Yes, I definitely recommend a proofreader if you're submitting to a literary agent who will then represent your work and take it to a publisher. You don't have to worry about proofreading, but if you are self-publishing your book, it's really essential because you likely your copy editor or your stylistic editor will be very heavily involved in the edit, and so there probably will be a handful of typos left at the end, even after you've gone through it. And sometimes it's on the first page, personally, that I'll miss something. I don't know why. And then when your book designer will have laid out the text and made it look like a real book, some errors can get introduced there, like an extra enter, for example, where there isn't supposed to be one, and that's kind of glaring. So proofreader will look at the proofs, it's in the name. They read the proofs produced by the book designer, and they do a very thorough word by word read through, and then cleaning out any remaining typos so that your book looks professional when it hits the shelves. And those proofreading is about 2 to 3 cents a word on average in Canada.
With Treason, I had a very good standard copy editor, maybe it was you, I don't know. And just really, it cost me $1,300, something like that. But it was that phenomenon of taking my book, which was well edited, I'll get to that in 1 second, but not the standard copy edited, and boom, wow, it's a real book. But my editor, previously I had 2, but mostly it was Elaine Kalman-Naves, who teaches or workshops, what it's called here in memoirs, I believe. And she helped take all these stories, anecdotal stories of these people did this over here, and they were in Belfast, and then we're at Wounded Knee, and she helped bring it into something that congealed, that was a whole. And I think that was I don't remember the phrase, but the real editing part. We also had help from my poetry editor, Derek, but then he had a child that he had to move on to something else. Enormously helpful.
Amazing. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Can I just say that, just on that point, is that the workshops that the PWF, I've taken, I think, 4. They're a remarkable resource. And you also meet people there who you can form a writing group with, because we've all, or some of us have mentioned here the importance, but maybe we haven't emphasized enough of having the most important thing is to have a good book. So,
It's pretty consistent
yeah.
advice from writers.
and it's not an easy thing to do. It's, if you're writing fiction, you're creating a whole world, and that's quite a challenge. If you're writing nonfiction, it's a whole different type of a challenge. So it's like any other skill, you have to work away at it and build your competence in doing the different aspects in fiction, creating character, dialogue, setting, pacing. There's a lot to learn. And the QWF, one of the missions here is to help writers, to develop writers. And also in the type of work you've just been discussing, I think there's the hire a professional site.
Hire a writer.
Hire a writer site, which, but I don't think it's just writers, right? There's also other types of professionals who are offer their services through the hire a writer site, which you can find.
Well, I'm not on the board of this organization, and I want to confirm 100% what you just said. I've become a poet because of this organization. I always kind of just write something and put it in the drawer, and who knows what happened to it. But because I took a goodly number of poetry workshops here, and it was done so well, and using your example, sometimes there's even a group, or we have the Two Susan Poetry Exchange, that resulted from a bunch of people having the workshop and saying, hey, why don't we get crowd together? And we did it. And I'm sure, I wish I had come here first. That was the one thing that is there, in terms of publishing, I wish I had come here first and talked to one of the people here and said, because I didn't know, like there are, for example, are there 20 English language publishers in Quebec or something like that? Somebody gave me a list from here and it was.
Yeah, well, but we share the office with the Association of English Language Publishers of Quebec, and they have probably more than 20 members.
Yeah.
But some of them are very small. They might just be publishing 1 or 2 books a year.
Right, and some of them are very specialized in specific genres as well. Like, like I always tell people, like a publisher who does graphic novel will probably not be interested in like a sci-fi epic, vice versa. Katie, then we have Michael afterwards.
Just a quick question. I heard hire a writer, but where would you look for a bank of editors? Is there?
Yeah, Editors Canada has an online
Editors.
directory. It's got hundreds of editors. And the advantage of that is, as opposed to a self-publishing services provider, is that you work directly with the editor that you hire. So they're getting all of the money that you're giving them, which means they can spend a lot more time working on your project, rather than giving away a portion of that to the company they work for.
Oh, great.
And you can also meet with them, you can ask for a Zoom chat or something and talk about your publishing goals and see whether you're
A right fit.
a good fit,
Okay,
yeah,
great, thanks.
yeah.
All of that is also true of our site.
Yes. Yes, hire a writer.
Yeah, very good editing services.
Claire.
I'm glad to hear that, glad to hear. So yeah, take our workshops and avail yourselves of hire a writer.
Yes.
Michael.
Latoya, you mentioned the algorithm, and Don, I think you talked about effectively direct marketing to bookshops. And I wonder if you could also more just about marketing once the book is out, marketing and publicity. What you've done, what's worked, what has not worked.
There's a probably, as you might know, if you've looked into this world at all, there's a tremendous amount of content online about self-publishing, some of which is useful, so you have to filter through a lot. But definitely in terms of the Amazon algorithm and getting your book found, as they say, there are some things that you should aim to do, which reviews are very important. So people who, there's also the Goodreads site. They say that Goodreads, anyone can write a review, so that means people who are your friends and family. Amazon, they're not supposed to be people who you know, and they supposedly have ways of finding out. They're supposed to, for one thing, they have this thing that they're a confirmed buyer of the book. So that's one thing. I think the blurb that you do, that you write, describing the book, which is essentially the back cover synopsis of the book. I think that's very important in terms of marketing the book. So what is, you know, capturing the imagination of the reader, pulling the reader into the book. And then all of the, I think the quality of the book, like in terms of the cover, the different, the fact that it's professionally formatted. Just trying to think the other things I did in terms of, this was kind of, I got into Facebook groups where in different communities where the book is set. So it's the book set in Winnipeg. So I got into like the different neighborhoods where it's set and promoted the book, which is actually quite successful. The strategy. And when they kicked me out because I was like there too much. But anyway,
I've been kicked out of the better place.
and then, you know, I did another important thing is a website. I did a website, and then did questions for readers groups. You know, a list of questions that they can use to feed their conversation about the book. So I did a whole bunch of things like that. I would say I didn't mention the website is important, you know.
And you sell off your website.
Yeah, you're what they call the author platform, you have to.
Well, I redirect to Amazon from my website.
And actually, like, Latoya, I got the impression that you both sell your books, but in a way you're also selling yourself in terms of your.
Oh, yes,
profile.
author branding. So
Yeah.
I created a course on that, so that's what, touching on author branding, it's incredibly important. People will buy from you. I was watching his books actually and calculating the author branding behind it. So, just the picture, just the stance, you know, gives the impression, oh, he knows what he's talking about. I need to get this book. But, for me, marketing strategies for my books tend to be very strategic, and it starts in layers, like I mentioned that earlier. So I would have every strategy layered day by day, week by week, to drop at a certain time, and I'd be checking the charts to see how well it's doing. So say, for example, in the process, in the book creation process, I'm looking at the colors, even color for my book is something that's strategic, or the font that I use is something strategic. I say publishers or self-publishers actually, or writers, don't use the subtitle section enough,
Yeah.
because it's like a quick call to action for the parent or for the book reader. It tells you immediately what you will get right there at the top. Without reading, you can't take for granted that, oh, they'll like my book cover and then they'll read the description. Just imagine they don't even look beyond the title. So right there in my title, I'll have this, and this says online, it is a book that helps teach this, that. So if a parent is looking for these, to teach their child these values, boom, oh yeah, let me get this book right here. So that's what happens and I find it such a huge strategy to use the subtitle section. After that comes the back of the book, but I would say the metadata. So what I would do to create a description that is super engaging is I look for what parents are searching for, and I put that into my description. So it's just like Google. So if you search on Google or you search on Amazon, it will do the same thing for my book. That bring my book up top to the high search results for that. And then sometimes I'll place in keywords, you do that also in the background, but you also do it on your description. I don't know if we use this enough, but the A+ content is super good to use for your books if it's on Amazon KDP, so it just helps show like more of what you're offering the book reader. So it's called A+ content.
A plus content.
Yeah, so if you publish on Amazon, go look for it on your profile. You could go over to the help section and then look for A+ content. And if you take a quick look online, I'll see if I can show you right now. With me is the author of the Black Book of Poetry. It's one of the people I helped publish his book, which was almost top 100 book in Amazon, which is, if you know what Amazon is, it's pretty, it was like a press, like you watch the movies of Clark Kent in the media room, it was like that, trying to get his book at the top of Black Book of Poetry. And you'll see I use that section, the A+ content for his book. Let's get it up here, to just kind of give just graphics engaging for the reader when they're looking more, a little snippet of what the book looks inside, because not all the time, Amazon, yeah, fancy. So it was just to almost leverage how he is, his branding in a different way. It's really to capture the book consumer online. So that's something I would leverage as well, I would use. And after that, it's basically the pre-launch work. The pre-launch work. So that means I have a book cover reveal, I tease my audience, I show snippets, I do little conversations or interviews here and there. I think that Mr. started talking about the different angles of marketing. I chose to launch this around Mother's Day time, and I used the grandmother angle, then I used the mother's angle, then when Multicultural Day comes up, I use a multicultural angle, then when something for Canada comes up, I use the immigration angle. I find the angles wherever they are to remarket the book and to bring the book back up in the highlights. So my pre-launch is a lot of strategy, and I get my target audience charged and ready to buy at a certain time. Once that's done, you wanted to say something?
I was gonna ask you a question. Which social media channels do you use for all of that?
All of them. I use
Use them all?
TikTok, I use Instagram, I use Facebook,
YouTube?
I use, oh yes, YouTube. Like, there's not enough time to use them all, but you use them. Yeah, so graphics is really important. I'm also a graphic designer, so people love the graphics, anything that's engaging. Hey, feed me. So I use a lot of graphics. And then I have my friends who have kids, I have kids myself. You want to appeal to the parents, so they want to see what it looks like. What does your bedtime routine look like if you involve this book? So a lot of angles. Then I look at book reviewers. I look at social media influencers. So I have that lined up as well. She targets mothers. I need mothers buying this book. Hey, what's the deal if I send you my book and you do a reading for your audience of 6,000 people, or, so I have all of these strategies lined up one after the other until it meets the goal that I want. So that's kind of like a little bit of what goes on.
When do you have time to write it?
I don't write as often sometimes, but yeah, once I have my book done, it's really about what author goal I have for this book and how do I meet it the fastest, because once your book sort of goes off that hype, it's hard to start generating it all back again. So you have to maximize, be ready to do the work, maximize on every opportunity when it's in the public. I have media interviews set up, I have everything, everything set up to maximize the reach of this book and getting it as successful as it's gonna be.
So we'll take one more question from the room, and then we have quite a few online, but yeah, we'll take one question from the
I
room.
wanted to ask about launches, but I also wanted to share, because I'm working with a traditional publisher, but I think indie traditional publishers I feel like I'm self-publishing. I am doing so much marketing, and I think most of it takes place before the launch, right? The books. And I've been working really hard on back cover endorsements. Because the nature of my endorsement. Oh, yeah. And it's been so much work, but I tell you, I just got a Pulitzer Prize finally. It's mental health, so it's a real, I knew this was a very important book, but I mean, I can't believe this Pete Early.
And that was from a cold.
Absolutely didn't know me, but I'm thinking, and this is my marketing background in my former life, so it's, but I'm thinking, I can't tell you, months on this, it's ridiculous, and I'm dying to get into a third book. But the launch is driving me nuts. I need help here. I want to know your opinions, because paragraph, it's a small space. I really wanted to do a bit of a reading and have people sitting. I don't know, I don't like to be standing. I mean, maybe it's getting older, but I know their, the event coordinator's name.
Andreas
Andrew,
Catharis.
yeah, he said, yeah, you can do it here, but he says people don't really sit, they come and go between 2 and 4 on a Sunday afternoon. So I've been looking, and then I'm thinking, well, mostly it's your friends that come to the launch, for me, in my case, or my contacts. But what if this reaches out? I mean, you gotta know about spacing. How do you think about that? Maybe 2 different launches, maybe you just do your little party thing, celebration, and then the other one is a read. I don't know, so I'd like to know how you approach the whole launch business, which is driving me nuts.
Can I give a little, this is what I did, is I rented a gallery space. And the gallery sold alcohol, so I didn't have to supply any alcohol. All the people came, we got some media involved, CBC did a couple interviews, and I didn't have to share any profits with the bookstore.
Did you have a seating? In a gallery?
Yeah, there
Yeah.
there, actually, I had some tables, it was a children's book, so I had some tables laid with paper, and people could just color. And people stayed for the whole time, sold a lot of books,
Yeah.
and it was a great event.
Gallery's
Yeah,
nice space.
yeah, this was
Bookstores
Ban
are-
Gallery,
Which one?
Ban Gallery.
Okay.
Yeah, but I just like that we didn't have to share the profits,
And
because
more
otherwise they
space.
take, and there's more space.
So like St. Henry Books is a great little space.
Yeah.
They have 25 chairs they can put out,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it's not enough for
Yeah.
all the people who are gonna come to my launch.
Of course.
Can I say something? Because I know I'll talk about places like Petit John and Quarterly, Pulp Books, for example.
Wrong market, John Quarterly.
That's fair.
Anyway. I'm
But
just-
what I wanted to mention, Vo, was one of the draws that these places have for offering their spaces to offers for launches is getting people to come in and browse and buy books. I remember one of them, like, one of their asks is you actually promise or you guarantee to bring at least 25 people. Like, if you're gonna launch and no one comes, that's, it's kind of a bit of a loss. So you have to kind of promise at least 25 people. With that said, I would also temper expectations a little bit, because even Shawn Michaels would struggle to get, I don't know, how many people were at Shawn Michaels' launch, if you don't mind, like, it's still in the double digits, basically.
In
if that
paragraph,
makes sense,
the
yes.
average for a local Montreal author is 30.
There you go, that's pretty normal.
Yeah.
And
No, so I did 2 launches. One was online, one was in Lugelian Bookshop, which pictures itself as a feminist bookshop. So it's in the Gay Village, is a big LGBT crowd, like collection that sells, but it would probably be great for mental health. So I really looked at it was exactly the right bookshop for my book.
Good match.
35 people for online and in person. Lugelian was thrilled. That was double what they expected. You get a great profit, like about $10 a copy. So they will sell it, you bring copies, they sell it on the day, it was fantastic. Yeah, it's sold 24 copies, which is pretty good out of a crowd of 35.
I don't know why.
You pay, they provide the space for free, you have to provide refreshments if you want that. I did, actually, no one drank or ate a thing. So I think people just weren't interested, I mean, they were listening to the chat and then kind of browse the bookshop afterwards.
Did you repeat the name of the bookshop?
It's Lugelian.
Lugalia.
Yeah, does anyone know who? It's just south of the capital.
it is in the Gay Village, I know
Yeah.
of it, but it's a feminist.
So it's EUG again.
It's a hard word to spell.
EUGELIONE.
It's a hard word to spell, it's a hard word to spell.
It's all phonetic and
They're
all
fantastic.
Amazing.
I don't know how many people, I don't know how many friends you have, but a space that you might not have thought of if you're willing to either bring in a book publisher, a bookseller to the space.
Yeah, paragraph is willing to come.
The Atwater Library,
I wondered about
the
that.
auditorium.
Susan Doherty had,
Oh.
the auditorium?
The auditorium here at the Atwater Library. Susan had hers, I was gonna say that first, but
Yeah.
Susan knows like a million,
Yes.
thousand million people. I don't know if you've got that. That was at Victoria Hall.
It was packed.
It was
It's
packed.
Selwyn House.
Yes, yes. But a more modest sized room where you wouldn't be embarrassed if you only had 50 people.
Right.
Or, where it would really be pretty full if it's 80 people.
Yeah.
Is this auditorium and it's reasonable to rent.
Well,
So,
we had to regions.
yeah,
Plus CP in their newsletter.
I wondered about that, like
Yeah.
Westmount Library.
I can talk to you about this.
Okay.
And I'll just say, because I don't wanna like say, oh, I'm not sharing my information.
Yeah.
If you have a book that you think might be of interest to a broader audience, you don't necessarily know them. Tell me about it if you're ready to launch your book, if it's, you know, especially if you've gotten a good review or something. Or if you've already launched your book, you can come to us and, you know, I'm not promising that I can get everybody a gig. But I have on occasion made a recommendation to the library for their Thursday afternoon series. And they have an older demographic who attends those. It's a pretty white-haired crowd, which I used to say without thinking I was. But I'm thinking for your topic, it might not be inappropriate. So maybe that wouldn't be your launch,
Right.
but it would be an additional opportunity for you to present from the book and to sell books.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Good idea.
And go in a newsletter.
And you get to be in there.
Because I don't know their distribution.
It will be in our newsletter regardless of work, because if you send it to us and you're a QW.
The library.
Oh, the library's newsletter.
But we should mention that you should send your, you should put your event, once you do know your launch event, and anything else you're doing into our calendar on the website. We have a community calendar. So look at that on the website if you're not familiar
An
with it.
interesting point apropos this group is that notice all the marketing work I'm doing and I have a publisher.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I might, that's,
the world is not what it once was,
No,
you
not at all.
know?
I do. I know we have at least 12 questions from chat, probably a bit more now, but John, let's get the most interesting one first.
Yeah, sure. There are two kind of related
Okay.
questions. One person asks, I'm published online via D2D, which I assume is Subtract to digital. But most bookstores reject my self-published book 8 times out of 10. How do I get it into bookstores? And likewise, how do you get your book into libraries? This person has trouble getting it into libraries.
So to sum up for our panelists, how do you get your books into bookstores and libraries? Anyone wanna take the first?
Well, I went to 2 places. I just went to, one was Distill. And I even was a bit much, I knew, I'd been told that the rate is 60-40, 60 goes to the author, 40. And I said, I'm self-published, would you be willing to negotiate a bit? And she was very clear that she was not. She had, you know, she was having a business too. So, and then I went to Port-de-Tête. And I was surprised, given it's a French book. I wasn't surprised, but I'm a little, I was happy with the response. And so just going to them, and they said yes. Now, they are both known, I think, especially Port-de-Tête. I mean, Port-de-Tête, they'll have something Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, might be Francophone poets, might be any number of other subjects and so on. So that they do it regularly. Anyway, I just wanted to mention those 2.
Okay, so for me, how it works, so when it comes to Indigo, for some, and Indigo pulled my books from Ingram, I didn't do anything about it, they had it online. But it was the end that I needed, so one thing I would suggest is always Google your book, see where your books are at. It's pretty cool to see where your books are being placed, and that's the end that you will need to say, I have seen that you have my books online, would you consider putting my book physically in your bookstore? That's what I did with Indigo, I got my books in the bookstore. But again, the channel that you publish is important. They don't take copies from Amazon KDP or Lulu or anywhere else but Ingram. And most bookstores here seem to do that right now. When it comes to schools as well, you need to find out who do they get their supplies from, and that could change as well. So that's how I got my books into schools as well. I also suggest like a media pitch or a kit as an author. So have like what you want to say, why you think it's gonna be beneficial, and this is something that you could use for schools, for libraries, for bookstores, for media coverage. You know, I got a comment from a journalist and she said, you make it so easy for us to figure out how we want to do your story and why we should do your story and why it's important for our audience. You just have all the points right there in the pitch. So it's like, yeah, of course, let's just figure out and book her and have her. So that's what I sort of have ready at all times. For libraries, just walk up. And again, I think our colleague here mentioned that you have to be willing to do the work when you're a self-publisher. So that means you're on the ground going to your community library, going to your community bookstores. The independent bookstores are fabulous. Barbara Books, the owner, she's fabulous. She will definitely make room and listen to you and take your books. So you would be surprised at how many bookstores actually want independent authors to come and offer their books to be placed there. They will do it. So just be ready for the work and be ready to pitch your book. You know, the selling points of your book, why it's important to be placed here, why should it take a space on the shelf, and what benefit it would have for the community for your books to be placed there. But that's about it. A pitch for your book, a media pitch, your branding as an author, being able to publicly speak about your book and be ready for questions and walk up to the library. I actually found out my library, I live in Chattagate, is given, wait for it, free book launches
No.
for their authors.
Oh.
Can you imagine? I said, are you serious? So yeah, that's one of the benefits that they give, and when I'm ready, I actually speaking to her today. I just bring my book, they do everything, they market, they promote, they pay for the hall, they pay for the food, I mean, it's just for me, I'm just like.
Wow.
So go to your public library and see what type of connections that you can make there and see what they offer and see how, just like Lori was suggesting, see what, they can help push your book.
And this is the public library.
This is the
And there
public
are no
library.
problem, people selling books?
They're doing it for me, everything, promoting me, so I just have to send my picture, my book graphics.
Can I ask, is it mostly an Anglophone library?
No, it's not even an
Okay.
Anglophone library, actually, yeah, so find out in your constituent what benefits they have for authors, call them up and see, and sometimes suggest things, say, well, I know this library is doing that, would you consider? You'd be surprised at what you can get when you ask, for it, yeah.
Support public libraries.
Yeah.
That's it, Kate, because I think you wanted to jump in on that, and then we'll go to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, like, can one do more than one launch? Or is that kind of,
I was
Yes.
toying around with this
Yeah.
I didn't want to suggest it, but I was like, listen, I would brand it as a book tour.
yeah,
And launch.
very intelligent.
An international
Yeah.
bookstore, I think that is.
Yeah, and I do that, and I call it a book tour and I launch everywhere.
Yeah,
And you
Online.
can launch from.
Yeah, different bookstores, yeah.
and the libraries often call it meet the author.
Yeah, that's
So,
it.
and you'll talk about your latest book, your next
Yeah.
book, or,
So launch is.
I love that, yeah.
yeah, launch makes it sound too official.
Yeah, a book tour, people think like, oh, wow, she's having a book tour?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna add on the point of, being refused by bookstores or libraries, and I probably shouldn't say their name, but the town on Royal Library, I walked in with a book and said, you haven't got my latest one. And she said, is it self-published? We don't accept self-published. So that's kind of why I say, don't use the term self-published, because it's a curse.
Yeah.
However, I persuaded her that it was acceptable quality, because what she basically explained that we get too many. I've had a bookstore say, you're the 10th person who's walked in today asking me to take their book on consignment. It was in Toronto, and there was a big writers event on, she said, so everybody was in town for getting their book.
And it helps with your branding.
Yeah.
You show up and you have a package or you present an email beforehand and you ask for a meeting. And like I said, same thing I had with that library. She was like, well, I'm gonna have to review your book because you know the content, as a self-publisher, but your branding and how you present yourself. That first look at you, what you offer can make someone take a deeper look into your book.
Yeah, it's the difference between writing this kind of book or writing.
Yeah.
Indeed.
I'm glad to realize I'm doing an international tour. Because I'm going to New York to punch, so
Yeah.
Please,
and if I can get Plattsburgh.
You're North American.
People in-
get Plattsburgh, 3 days, and it's really that, branding,
I've changed I can test this in terms of branding. I changed my bio that now reads internationally acclaimed. The Dale Hunter series. Okay, so I have a series
Yeah.
and I've sold books in more than 15 different countries.
Wow.
And I have a few enthusiastic fans who actually told me they liked it. And I had an editor, I've forgotten his name now, Neil Hyman, who was a vice president at Putnam or something. I talked to him at a writers conference. And he said, yeah, that's fine. It's not lying. It's just marketing.
Yeah.
So you're telling the truth, you have an international audience, and they like your book,
Mhm,
and you've sold a few
mhm.
in 15 different countries.
Incredible,
Yeah.
what a success.
Yeah, marketing is everything.
Yeah, that's it, it's not lying, it's marketing.
John, do you have any, well,
What's one question?
In terms of translation, have you ever been approached by publishers to translate your work in French? Do you feel it's easier to get translated in French being Canadian? Or I think we can wrap on that, how do you get translated?
yeah. Have you ever gotten requests to be translated, is the question?
I've made the request.
I have a few books in French. I have had my target audience ask, and you will see as well as you go as an author and the opportunities that are coming your way, then you will have to consider translation. I do have translators that I work with, and it's so important to have, just like an editor, it's so important to have a real one that's matching for your genre as well, you know, and the last person I worked with, she worked with the government. I was just fascinated by how different and how skillful she was translating to the last person I worked with. It could be, it's possibly around the same thing as an editor, but it could be costly as well. But I would definitely look at your target audience, what are they asking for? And believe it or not, Quebec is not my biggest consumer of French books. Germany is, Denmark is, not Quebec, and they were the one asking for it. So that just helped me to divert my attention a little bit more. But yeah,
Yeah,
that was a shocker.
So then you would get a European French translation rather than a Quebec French translation?
Yes, exactly. So that's how, that is definitely what I had to, because you know, your Quebec, our audience asks, and then you start seeing sales from that you never knew that people were interested in these books. So you're like, okay, now I have to change gears there.
Perhaps, sorry, just to riff off the question, were you also the ones who published the translations or?
Yes.
Okay.
What did you think about a bilingual book? Is that something that people are interested in, or is it better to publish a book in English and publish it in another language?
I mean, well, on one end, sure, I think that's great. On the other end, you can have two set of royalties. I mean, it's
Right.
two sets.
Selling double the
Yeah.
amount, okay.
Yeah, it's up to you.
Okay, perfect.
But I do like that.
I was gonna ask you a question. So if you're working with a translation, would you get an editor then? Say I was getting something done in Italian, would I then get an Italian editor as part of that translation? Would you recommend, or is that part of what the translator does?
Yeah, so
Because you can change meaning very quickly.
right, well, the translator is basically like another author, so you might want to get an edit done on their work, but I think that I'm honestly not really sure because I haven't edited any translated work.
I'm just thinking about.
Yeah,
Trying to hit the mark.
There are, I'll quickly jump in on this. There are translation editors and they're actually quite recommended to have it. As Laura had mentioned, a translation is basically almost like a collaboration, it's almost a brand new writing. And you would also need a translation editor to make sure that, you know, not just for the grammar, but to make sure that the translation is actually accurate.
Yeah.
Is it not true that QWF has a podcast or whatever it is, or something like this about translation?
We had a lunch and learn on how to get translated. They're still available on our YouTube channel. We had Katya Grubisic come talk to us about.
And I'm viewing it.
Oh.
It's an hour and a half. I'm
It's an hour.
an hour in, they come back. That's why I wanted to bring it up.
It's a lovely series, and really the gist of it is how does one get translated in Quebec. It's basically if a translator is passionate about your project, they will be the ones who make the pitch to a publisher. I remember the gist of that series.
Can I just add, just for the people online, so when you translate your book, it's a whole different book, you need a different ISBN and you need to have that data.
Actually, on the note of ISBN, every version of your book does need a new ISBN. So a hard copy would have a different one than a paperback would have, and every single ebook version also needs a different ISBN. You had a question.
Yeah, how did your books get known in Germany or other countries? And
Well, it's basically, well, this one is from Amazon, so it's what they were searching. Again, it's the metadata, what they're searching for. You know, it's not, it wasn't my target, but I said, okay. So, but it's not like I will change the translation either, right? It's not cheap. So I have to figure out where is the biggest market for me and where to dive, what's important here.
Yeah.
So if they're okay with the translation and I could have it be as universal as possible, I will do that, but it gets costly trying to specifically translate for a specific country or so. So yeah, it's metadata popped up, what type of books they liked, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Also, in response to what you were saying about writing a bilingual book, I did edit one book that was pretty successful, that was bilingual, and that was a Montreal author who was writing a picture book specifically for the children in the Armenian community. So they're all, many of them speak 2 or 3 languages, if not more. So she had kind of this book as not only entertainment, but also a language learning experience. And she would go and sell those books directly at Armenian community events and things like that. So for that market, it made a lot of sense to have a bilingual book. So it depends who you're trying to reach, I guess.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And actually, before I go to John for another question, Rachel McCrum's book is also bilingual. She did it with her partner. That's always lovely with mine. Yes, so partner did it, and it was shortlisted for the translation prize as well. John.
Is there a panel recommendation as to how best to obtain legitimate reviews for your book rather than, paid for reviews?
How do you get legitimate reviews?
I love this question. I wasn't supposed to answer, but I was gonna go there earlier today, but I'm happy it came out. But anybody else want to start? I think I started times, but anybody else want to start?
Got a review here for you.
I mean, well, don't do it the way that we've seen on Facebook groups by paying or, oh my gosh, there's so many things that were wrong with paying for reviews or having like a review chain. So it would be like, you buy my book, I buy your book, and then I go that 5-star review. And so I bounced upon this probably a few months into my authorship journey. But the book that they wanted me to review was so horrible. I said I could not, like my integrity. So I had to jump out of that type of thing. And so you want to make sure that you target in a really in way of integrity. So maybe try email newsletters, try doing a review campaign, as I call it. And you show different ways of why people should buy a book or why reviews are important. Sometimes it's basically saying, well, I'm a small business as an author, and this is how reviews can help me, and this is how reviews can take my book from here to here. Maybe educate your audience on how reviews help your book, or how it can help you to succeed, and then tug at their hearts a little bit to get them to do it. But I would not pay to get reviews.
I have a related question to Laura, actually. In the process of editing and getting reviews and feedback, where do you put the advanced review copy if you do an early book? Do you include that in the process, or do you recommend that useful before you do final print and publish?
Yes, absolutely. So after you get your book edited and you've already taken it to the best possible place it could be, I would definitely get advanced reader copies out to a sample demographic of your market. They're called ARCs online, if you see that acronym.
Yeah.
And those people you can have a deal with them where they will give you an honest review of your work. And if you like the review, you can use it in your author promo. But that's a great way to market your book as well, because if you've gotten some reviews, even if it's not somebody famous, but you've got people backing you up that this is a great read, it's better than nothing. It's a stepping stone. I think
Yeah, that's what I've been using.
Yeah.
They're unproofed though. It is a final proofreading that happens. It says unproofed on that one.
Correct.
website.
And you can put it on the back of your book.
I
Yeah.
put 10 typos.
And they can also,
Last page.
because I'd like to add one thing, jumping off Latoya's beautiful response, and of course from Laura, that if you go online, there are places like Book Sirens, for example, and similar spots where you could put your arc, and then people who love reading would read it, and then in return for getting early access to your book, they would leave an honest review on Amazon, and it's free again. I personally don't trust the paid ones, but and that's a different discussion. But the other thing I will also add is book grammars, booktubers, book talkers now, which like there are people who like say I'm a book Instagrammer and I like reviewing gay books so if you're coming up with a gay novel, make sure this person has a copy of it, get them an advanced reader copy, and they will probably happily talk about that book on their channel, etc., etc. So yeah, that's my little contribution. Do we have?
I'd like to just say something before, because we're very close to 3 and I don't know if everybody can stay or not. Our experts came here for no remuneration. So I want to thank them again personally, because this has been quite remarkable. And the amount of information that you've had to share is really fantastic. Some of them actually do consulting, and I would like to give those people an opportunity to tell how to be reached, if they want to be reached. So if we could just take a moment for Latoya, certainly. I think Laura maybe would like to do that, to just tell the people in the room and online how to reach you if they want to.
Sure, you can email me, latoyabelfon@gmail.com, or through my company, lavixpublishing@gmail.com. I do have consultations that you can book. If you follow me on Instagram, I give tons of content on all things self-publishing, traditional publishing, graphic designing, illustrating, whatever it is. You can follow me for free information. And yeah.
Could you say it a little bit slower? What's your Insta?
Latoya Belfon John is my Insta.
Belfon John.
And latoyabelfon@gmail.com. You can email me and I can send you my link for consults if you get it.
And we'll get everything here so that if you didn't pick it up, you can write to Riley and Riley will give it to you.
Good, I'll write to you.
Okay,
Laura?
I'll go, yeah. If you're looking for a book editor, you can reach me at laura@cellardooreditorial.com. My website is cellardooreditorial.com, and I specialize in kidlit, young adult, middle grade, and picture books. I also specialize in memoirs and prescriptive nonfiction.
What's your plan,
MacAulay, yeah, all A's.
Del, do you do consulting or
Not anymore.
not at all? If there's anyone I missed.
Well, you can buy my book.
$69.
The full name, yeah, the full name is Delvin, which is another long story. DelvinChatterson.com.
It's a good thriller name.
I'm sorry.
It's a good thriller author name. Yeah.
My mother named me after Franklin Delano Roosevelt, so I don't think she had thrillers in mind.
Well, maybe so.
Maybe, I don't know what she had in mind.
And Don, so what's your plan?
My website is Don Macdonald, MacDonald.ca. .com.
It's a great website. I've been there. Jim, do you like, maybe people would like to follow you somewhere or?
Absolutely. Jim dot Olwell, which is spelled not like George, but well, he has an R, I have an L, so OLWELL @gmail.com. Love to hear from you.
Awesome.
Perfect. Well, thank you all so much. It is 3 o'clock, and in respect to all our panelists' time, I think we should call it here. I want to thank Latoya, thank Del, Dawn, Laura, and of course, Jem for being here. I'd like to thank, people in the room for contributing and asking questions, and people online. We're sorry we weren't able to get to all of your questions, but I hope that you were able to still learn a lot from today's session.
We did. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, PW, for organizing this.
Yes, you have it us, it was so nice.
Welcome. It was really good. You guys were very good. And Riley was amazing.
Well, this moderator makes it.
It was 2022.
And as usual, I learned more than anybody else.
I have pages of notes here for everybody.
Yeah, it was doing really well. That's coloring. That's how much.
It's not easy, yeah.
Oh, fine. Yeah, yeah. Very good.